evening. I'm Francis Levy, co-director of the Philoctetes Center, and welcome to Our Life in Poetry, John Donne. Now, the art show you see up on the walls, Hypergraphica, will continue through November 29th, and it's curated by Hallie Cohen, who is the chair of the art department at Marymount Manhattan College. And across the hall in the annex, we also have the show sort of continues, and we have other pieces plus written materials pertaining to this particular show. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce Michael Braziller. Michael Braziller is the president of Persea Books, which is a literary and educational press. He founded in 1975, and he is also the director of the Philoctetes Poetry Series. I'm very pleased to present Mike, who will in turn introduce our distinguished guest tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Maria Ponsot is a native New Yorker who has enjoyed teaching at Queens College, Beijing United University, and Columbia University. Among her awards are an NEA Creative Writing Grant, the Delmore Schwartz Memorial Prize, and the Shaughnessy Medal of the MLA Association. Ponsot's most recent collections are The Bird Catcher, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award for Poetry in 1998, and Springing, New and Selected Poems. Springing is available for sale afterwards. She'll be reading at the end of the event, as we've done now sort of as a tradition, she'll be reading several poems of her own, and she'll be sure available to sign copies of her books at the end of the evening. We have selected 4 wonderful poems by John Donne for tonight's discussion. And the evening will begin, let me see how we'll do this. I'll read, Marie will open with a small introduction on Donne, or give us a small context or a kind of general factual thing on Donne. And then we'll go through the 4 poems. And it was her idea that one of them you were going to read. So I hope you have your copies of the canonization, because each one of you will be reading one line from that poem. And sorry to spring that on you, but you can have a few minutes to brush up or whatever, or rehearse or whatever you need.
Quickly counting to see which line you're going to get. Lots of luck.
Well, we'll go.
My theory, though, is that if we're going to talk about poetry, the most appropriate and civilizing thing to do is to put a little poetry in the air, warm up the air a little bit, and also to invest just a little bit of our own energy in the form of vocal tension, to hear how it sounds, to make those noises. One of the great puzzles that I've been thinking about a good deal for the last couple of years is that we make a distinction, a quite clear, strong distinction between speaking and singing, even though the apparatus is the same for both. I don't think anyone knows, at least Google couldn't tell me, when that started. How did that happen? What's going on there? Part of my interest in it was fueled by the fact that I am a bird watcher of the armchair kind. I like to sit in a rocking chair on a porch in a fairly woodsy place and listen to the birds and look at them through my binoculars. And because I had the great good luck to have a wood thrush habitually sitting there, singing away, and saw that through the beginning of the summer and the mating and the territorial and all those simple things that birds do with song. I also was able to hear their domestic life. There's a lot of singing that goes on in a very small voice. People will say, I will say she, speaking of a bird, and people say, oh, but females don't sing. Yes, they do. And that made me think the domestic speech of birds is apt to be more like twanging a rubber band than their developed song. And I wonder if maybe our speech is a little bit more like twanging a rubber band than Aretha Franklin, say, you know, or someone who opens her face and sings. And poetry lies somewhere in between the two, because the interest of the poet in the tune of the poem is very important. So.
I was interested to see that the last poem that we'll be looking at, Hymn to God the Father,
Yes.
apparently was sung a great deal in Donne's time.
Yes, as a matter of fact, all of his songs were sung. And it's presumed by some people that he was one of the singers. By the time a century had gone by, his songs were fairly well known as music as well as text. If only we had a...
We need an organ.
No, lute.
A lute, oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Most of them have lute accompaniments. Yeah. The ones that I thought we would look at are the ones that I have loved for many years. I think the reading of John Donne was one of the things that made me want to be a person who wrote poems. Not that I thought I could write like Donne, any more than reading Shakespeare made me feel I could write like Shakespeare. But one of the ways that literature functions, I think, after you've taken in a certain amount of poetry, like some sponge, you're just taking it and taking it, eventually it feels like your turn in the conversation. And you want to say something. And you want to say it in this way, at this pitch. And John Donne, I think, has one of the most attractive pitches of anybody. One of the features of all his poems, even the ones that are satires and long, is that they are intended as address. Sometimes he's talking to some general unknown group, but most of the time they have the force of drama. They're almost like a soliloquy in a play.
I find it really interesting that he wrote not to be published. I think he was afraid to be published.
No.
Well,
You think so?
he could have.
Well, he was he was eventually embarrassed by
He was embarrassed, but he, whatever the reasons, most of these poems were read out loud to a small group of patrons
Absolutely.
or friends and I think you can detect that when you read it. There's a slightly
yes, I agree.
Okay, there's a slightly different quality, and it might be useful as we read these poems to keep in mind that they were spoken to a small group. And,
They were.
And it gives it gives it something special, and it's different from reading a modern poem. In that.
And it's a really important fact about the poems of that period. There were people who were writing for money. They were people who if there is a class distinction, and there always is, especially in Great Britain, were of a class that had to earn their living. They wrote for money. Then there's the level of patronage, which all poets expected, even the most aristocratic, like George Herbert, whose brother, by the way, was a good friend of John Donne. But it was quite common to not publish your poems.
Right.
If you thought of yourself as a gentleman, you probably didn't consider that an option. That was not the way a gentleman made his money. He made it because the king gave him land or something. God knows how they managed their finances. But only, I think, 6 or 7 of Donne's poems ever appeared during his lifetime, and they were chiefly poems that were occasional. They were in praise of an important person, or in praise of a fellow poet, or an elegy. Otherwise, he mostly sent his poems around to his friends. And they were collected by a pretty undiscriminating printer after his death,
Yeah.
and appeared then. And that is the reason, I don't know why we've stuck to it. That is the order in which the poems now appear, and it's the reason that people's view of Donne is not chronological at all. He had a childhood we don't know too much about. And the reason we don't know too much about it was that his mother, talk about illegal, his mother was a Catholic. And that was one of the things for which you could have your head removed and stuck on a pike on London Bridge. She was overtly Catholic. She didn't try to hide it, although her harboring of priests was not on the domestic premises. She contributed to a cousin of hers who did that. Donne's own travel through what people generally suspect was the Jesuit household of one of his cousins as a boy, preceded his appearance at the university, where he never took a degree because you had to swear various things to do that. That meant a renunciation of the Catholic idea. It took him a while to figure out what religion he was supposed to belong to. And he had a fairly sophisticated, worldly youth in London. That accounts for all the wonderful erotic poems of a young man. Go and catch a falling star, and swear nowhere lives a woman chaste and fair, right? All those poems, right?
Well, when I try to imagine the audience for some of those poems, I think there was sort of irreverent male witty friends.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You
The four we've selected, I think the audience is different. He's talking to somebody.
I think so too.
Okay. How about if I read The Good Morrow?
Oh, do.
Okay. And keeping in mind what she was saying about tone, really, the music of this, or it's quite amazing. I wonder by my troth what thou and I did till we loved. Were we not weaned till then, but sucked on country pleasures childishly? Or snorted we in the seven sleepers' den? 'Twas so, but this all pleasure's fancies be, if ever any beauty I did see, which I desired and got, 'twas but a dream of thee. And now good morrow to our waking souls, which watch not one another out of fear, for love, all love of other sights controls, and makes one little room and everywhere. Let sea discoverers to new worlds have gone. Let maps to others worlds on worlds have shown. Let us possess one world, each hath one and is one. My face in thine eye, thine in mine appears, and true plain hearts do in the face's rest. Where can we find two better hemispheres, without sharp north, without declining west? Whatever dies was not mixed equally. If our two loves be one, or thou and I love so alike, that none do slacken, none can die. We were talking before how intermittently throughout our lives this poem has come back to us. And to think it was written 500 years ago, and that every appropriate moment.
Some piece or other will come back.
Yeah.
I know that we were both saying that we read it in our mid-teens for the first time, and the lines that stayed most poignantly with me at that time, and 1,000 other times in the rest of my life, when he says, "And now good morrow to our waking souls, that watch not one another out of fear." As a 15-year-old, I watched everybody out of fear. I watched everybody, and I watched them out of fear. And one of the great blessings of getting to the age where you can have friends is that dissipates, or begins to dissipate. Of course, it then, on other occasions, comes right back. But the poem itself is turns and turns around that idea of everything that can happen if you are not terror-stricken, if you're not scared stupid. The reason he gives for the absence of fear is that love casteth it out. Guess what? Love, all love of other sights controls, and makes one little room and everywhere. That certainly is an idea that is constant in Donne.
We will certainly see in all the poems this notion of a kind of explicit and implicit social criticism. He contrasts the completeness of his state of love, or their state of love, with the folly of, let's see, discoverers to new worlds have gone. I think in almost all the poems we're looking at, he takes on the world and asserts this world of complete love over the making and the spending and the discovering and the exploring.
Right.
But so intense is his feeling, so intense is what he's describing. What I think is going on in the first two stanzas is that he's in the process, in a way, of dealing with something that's very new to him. There's a sort of tone of, to me, of kind of wonder or surprise,
Right.
that he's had. I think he's kind of maybe an old hand at love. He's had his share of experiences, but something new and very different, almost in the process of this poem, is sort of taking place.
Yes, I think.
And he
that's
doesn't
true.
really know quite how to.
Well, he doesn't. He is a discoverer. He lives at the height of the age of discovery, as we know. Discovery of all kinds. Not only are people sailing the great oceans of the world and coming back with unheard of treasures. They are actually migrating, they're moving out and moving in. And the sea discoverers are eminent persons at court where he had access and spent a good deal of time. Another thing that was happening at this very moment was a new sophistication in maps. This is the moment where if you go to an exhibit at the New York Public Library, for example, of the history of maps, there's a whole crowd of new maps right around this period. So the idea of mapping, the kind of abstraction that that calls for, the rectification of a point of view, is part of the construct of his motifs. He uses the motif of discovery a lot. I think he was discovering himself in discovering his passions and discovering the possibility of love.
It's almost like a new category of experience for him.
Yes.
It's something akin to discovering an island or a new land, or
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
it's.
right. I'm happy that we start with this poem because it is such a beginning to the trajectory of his ideas about love. I made a kind of a list. I'm not going to read you the whole thing because that would take a long time. But these are about a third of the places that I marked in my text as being steps on the way to saying what he thinks about love. I haven't arranged them in order. I've taken them in the order in which they came in the book. But you will see, I think, the peculiar quality of them. I certainly wouldn't want to call him a feminist. I think he would be outraged. And yet, he is extremely interested in equality. He thinks that women are interesting. He thinks that they are just as interesting as he is. The next poem that you and I are going to read together in the canonization, he says, "So to one neutral thing both sexes fit, we die and rise the same, and prove mysterious by this love." In love's infiniteness, he says, "We will have a way more liberal than changing hearts to join them. So we shall be one and one another's all." Oh. In the song, "Sweetest love, do not go for weariness of me, nor in hope the world may show a fitter love for me," he says, "When thou sighest not wind, but sighest my soul away. When thou weepst, unkindly kind, my life's blood doth decay. Destiny may take thy part, and may thy fears fulfill. But think that we are but turned aside to sleep. Even death is not the end of love. Think that we are but turned aside to sleep. They who one another keep alive, ne'er parted be." And then in the legacy he says, "Myself, that is you, not I," and does a whole paradoxical twist around talking about the way they exist in each other. And in the fever he says, "Oh, do not die, for I shall hate all women so when thou art gone." That thee I shall not celebrate when I remember thou wert one. But yes, yet thou canst not die. I know to leave this world behind is death, but when thou from this world doth go, when thou from this world doth go, the whole world vapors with thy breath. And in the anniversary, who is so safe as we, when none can do treason to us, but one of us two? And the valediction of my name in the window, here you see me, and I am you. All my souls imparadised in you, in whom alone I understand and grow and be. It must have been exhausting to have him looking at you. Thou art so truth that thoughts of thee suffice to make dreams truths and all fables histories. Enter these arms, for since thou thought it best not to dream all thy dream, let's act the rest. That use of the imperative is another characteristic of Donne's. Enter these arms. Go and catch a falling star, catch with child a mandrake root. Find where all past years are, and who cleft the devil's foot. He's giving orders all the time. And the result of that is an increase of that thing of drama that I feel so substantial in his work. I think one of the characteristics of all art, one of the causes of the excitement we feel when we encounter art is mental action. Something happens inside our heads because of what we're looking at or hearing. And that quality of mental action is vivified and given a kind of explosive turn when he does this commanding, you know. Another part of that is that I always tell my students this, because they, like me, will get out the New Yorker and look in the front and see what's going on in town, and this is what's at the theater, and this is what's at the movies. And when John Donne and his friends wanted to go to the theater, honey, it was Hamlet. A new play, you know. Yeah. Drama was the hot ticket.
Well, talking about openings, the canonization, for God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love.
It's full of orders.
It's full of orders, yeah.
Shall we try reading it?
One or two words I just would add about the title of The Good Morrow. That one thing that occurred to me on the 200th reading is that I want to emphasize again this idea of what I think Marie was, what she definitely was talking about, this notion of discovery of really a rare experience, and the title strikes me because I think the poem is in a way an eye-opening. It's an eye-opening love, and something within the poem itself conveys this very unusual and almost overwhelming experience of this kind of merging that you were talking about, where the two become one.
Yeah.
And he almost depicts in different places in other poems the sense of surrender or the loss of himself.
Absolutely.
To this almost new personality that they form.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's a wonderful book by Elaine Scarry that I've been talking about these days called On Beauty and Being Just. And one of her ideas in that is that the great power of art, the liberating power of art, particularly of literature, which is her main subject, is that it decenters us while we attend to it. Instead of the usual grasp or grip of the self-conscious I, we are moved off that center into a radius of our circle, and we're looking out to what we can take in.
One of the poems after the canonization, Valediction Forbidding Mourning, talks about his verses, and he equates, we'll get to that, he equates their love, or he talks of how their love will be, what is it, epitomized or conveyed or put within the song and well, part of his art that will be read in future generations,
right.
So that this experience, this loss of control, or this new merging,
right.
is he's very conscious that it was at his best. It was in his writing. So. Okay, so how are we going to do the canonization? David, are you going to get started?
What?
Well, you've got to read the first line.
Yes.
And we're just going like this. We're going.
Let me just make my biggest announcement on this subject.
Okay.
It's very simple. You can't do it wrong. We'll just go this way. And,
yes, we're going.
at first
you can do
line
like a
is the
wave,
beauty.
you know.
So from comma to comma, just one line.
Oh yeah, one line.
Yes.
One line.
And
The canonization. For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love.
Or chide my palsy or my gout.
My 5 gray hairs, or ruin fortune flout.
With wealth your state, your mind with arts improve.
Take you a course, get you a place.
Observe his honor or his grace.
Or the king's real or his stamped face.
Contemplate what you will, approve.
why don't we take these three here? Oh, too bad.
Approved. So you let me go. Alas, alas, who's injured by my love?
What merchant ships in my sighs ground?
Who says my tears have overflowed his ground?
When did my coals of forward spring remove?
When did the heats which my veins fill?
Add one more to the plaguey bill.
Agree?
Soldiers find wars and lawyers find out still litigious men. I can stop that.
Yes, go ahead.
Though she and I do love, and of litigious men which quarrels move.
Though she and I do love.
Call us what you will, we are made such by love. Call her one, make another fly.
We are papers too, and Dr. Room calls die.
Tara?
And when in us find the eagle and the dove, the phoenix riddle hath more wit. By us, we two being one are it.
So to one neutral thing, both sexes fit.
We die and rise the same and prove mysterious by this love.
We can die by it, if not live by love.
Oh, and if unfit for tunes and hearse.
Our legends be, it will be fit for verse.
And if no piece of chronicle we prove, we'll build in sonnets pretty rooms. As little well-wrought urn becomes the greatest ashes. The greatest ashes as half-acre tombs.
And by these hymns thou shalt approve
Us canonized for love.
And thus invoke us, you whom reverend love
made one another's hermitage.
You to whom love was peace, that now is rage.
And did the whole world's soul contract and grow
Into the glasses of your eyes.
So made such mirrors and such spies.
Have they did all to you of demise?
Countries, towns, courts, baked from above. A pattern of your love.
It's so wonderful. The human voice is still the best instrument. And to hear the extreme fluidity of this poem come through all those channels, it's really such a pleasure. I think we should read to each other all the time. Also, when you think of the boring conversations you've had. You could be sitting there doing this. Wow. As a matter of fact, I have a lot of things I could say about this poem, and I bet you do too, and I bet most of you do too. But in a way, the best thing to do with it would be to read it 8 or 9 times aloud in various combinations. The thing about a poem, I think one of the reasons that we don't just pick up a book of poems and read them to each other all the time, is that a poem really improves the more of it you have in mind. The quickest way to get it in mind is to go very slowly. I read very fast. I read faster than anybody I've met so far. And I learned to read when I was very small. And so what I do with a poem when I'm reading it for the first time is to zap it. I read it, I take it in, a little bit, a little tiny bit. The suspense is over, I know where it's going, and then I read it again. And I do the same thing with a novel, by the way, which is even more comical. But to do it with a poem sometimes takes me 4 readings or 5 before it begins to penetrate. The words open up one into the other, and I begin to see why line 7 has a relation to line 1. A little relation, some little thing. There'll be 2 words ending in ation, for example, that make a kind of a music, that tie the parts together, you know. Thing in a poem that you have every right to expect is that for every word in it there will be at least 2 or 3 good reasons for its being there instead of some other word. I know that doesn't agree with the school of poetry that says first breath, best breath, but then I don't happen to belong to that school. So, you see how the crescendo of it comes. It's rhetorically designed. Do this, then the protest, alas, alas. Then call us what you will, we are made such by love. I think in relation to this poem it's fair to adduce Donne's biography a little. You have to imagine him as a really charming, and if you've seen any of the 3 probable paintings of his looks, a really charming guy. He was employed at one point, he worked at court as a secretary, and he was employed by his by the person to whom he was secretary, to be a tutor to his niece, his ward, really. Her parents had died, and he was raising her and taking care of her finances and so forth, which were considerable. And he was a successful tutor, but they fell madly in love. And in a kind of unheard of gesture for the time, they got married secretly. And it went on they were married for a couple of months, and they finally told the man who was Donne's employer, who had Donne thrown in jail instantly. She was of age, she was not an infant. But he was jailed. And one of the great treasures, by the way, of the Folger Library in Washington, D.C., is that they have, and if you're willing to have someone lead you through many corridors, secret places, open doors, another elevator with another key and another door to open, and finally into a room with flat cabinets, they will show you the letters that John Donne wrote from jail to his father-in-law. They didn't work, but somebody else got him out of jail. He had enough friends for that. Not enough friends to keep his job, however. The man he worked for had only one ward to lose and had lost her and was furious. Not only did he not give John Donne any work, he didn't let anybody else on whom he had influence or over whom he had any power give him any work either. So he spent the next 10 years doing very dangerous little jobs, dashing off to the lowlands on terrifying expeditions. There happened to be a war going on there, and he was going between the lines. And it was a life of great tension, during which he wrote many of the love poems that we're looking at.
Yeah, the good moral, let us possess one world, each hath one. That's it. He lived that. He almost consciously chose,
yes,
not just aesthetically within the poem, but in his life.
In his life.
To have a great love,
yes,
over his position in society and over whatever bright future he might have had.
That's right. I don't think he expected that his employer would be quite so nasty. But he had a pretty good idea. He wasn't surprised when they threw him in jail.
I love the good morrows so much because there's no bitterness, there's an awareness of,
right.
In the canonization, it's a much more complex and somewhat angry
right, well, at least testy.
At least testy.
Yes, he's complaining. It's a complaint.
Isn't he older?
He's old.
Canonization that he is?
Yes, but not very much.
No?
Not very much, no. He was 28, I think, something like that, I think, when they married.
His hairs.
5 gray hairs. Well, you know.
Yes, I do.
It doesn't mean he
That's,
had no
yeah.
other hair. And 5 great.
Who is he talking to? Who is this command to? For God's sake, hold your tongue. Is this maybe a friend who might have been critical of
all his friends who were saying to him,
"Don't do what you're doing.
Come on, or back off.
Right.
Back off. You.
So he's making the argument.
He's saying, "Come on."
Right.
Here I am. Here we are.
It's not a soliloquy.
No longer a soliloquy, it's an address.
Right.
The drama is on, that's exactly right. Although, of course, in fact, it's more a dramatic monologue. He's got the last word.
Yes.
And by the time he gets to the end, he's setting himself up as the model to be imitated. He starts very reluctant, and but he says, countries, towns, courts, beg from above a pattern of your love. I just want to say, although I am devoted to the whole body of English literature, English American Anglo literature, there are very few writers about love that imply the kind of valuing of the partner in love that Donne does. I know only one other poem that fits in this slot, and some of you probably know it. It's a very short poem by William Blake. It's called For the Sexes. What is it men in women do require? The lineaments of gratified desire. What is it women do in men require? The lineaments of gratified desire. So that's my only other entry in this contest. And I think it's extraordinary that it should have happened at a time when, well, of course, Elizabeth was on the throne. So women had that kind of stature. But that's not equality. Hardly any queen is engaged in practicing equality.
Well, the very diction in a lot of the poems we're looking at is so direct and so intimate and so respectful. Is that, I mean, or so...
When it's not respectful, it's engaging.
Yeah, but it's one person to very much to another, not either holding someone up or talking down to someone. It's at his, I wonder by my troth what thou and I did till we loved. I mean, that is a person talking to an equal. And,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now in stanza 3 here, it shifts a little from the sort of defensive dueling with a critical friend,
yes,
back into this merging.
Right.
This beautiful.
That's it. That's it.
And
he gives it up. Call us what you will.
Right, right.
I don't care.
And then brings in the eagle and the dove.
Yes, that's extraordinary.
Yeah. Which has certainly, I think, a sexual connotation on one level, isn't it? That it's... I know it has...
Yep.
The flies do too. And the flies do too, yes. I think the flies do also.
Well, I think with Donne's poems, it's safe to assume
that there's sexual...
that most remarks have a strong sexual underpinning. He's a little bit less likely than we might be to separate, to analyze out the parts of the experience one person has of another. I think so many of his poems try to sometimes it's just putting 10 pounds of the best butter over the gap, between the various parts of our lives. But he has a strong tendency to, I think, speak more of how body is mind is soul. The mind, body, soul thing is. He keeps melting them somehow. to one neutral thing both sexes fit. We die and rise the same, which is only partly sexual. No matter what kind of sex we're having or not having, we die a mortal death. And I suppose if you are in the belief system that he was, you expect to rise in that. And we prove mysterious by this love.
It's mysterious.
That word mysterious has always stopped me.
Yeah.
I never knew what it meant, and I guess what I like about it is that I still don't know.
Well, I don't think he fully knows what's going on.
Yeah,
in this in this experience, and.
The die has not only to do with mortality, but at this time in Shakespeare and Donne it referred to sexual intercourse, to consummation.
Well, yes, sure, and for a long time after and before, yeah, and the idea of rise and fall is always appropriate for male sexuality, and not always. All the people who thought they had the love thing right. You whom reverend love made one another's hermitage. You to whom love was peace that now is rage. Who did the whole world's soul contract and drove into the glasses of your eyes. Now, from above, beg a pattern of your love. Pretty good. Pretty good.
He's speaking to that other stanza there also.
Yes.
Because the eagle and the dove are one piece, as much as they're separate.
Right.
And he's mystified in that stanza.
Yes.
But willing to go for it. And they're not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there the idea, too, I can't quite pin it down, that this mysterious love has a religious kind of component, or
yes,
and that it is different or better than mere physical love? Doesn't he? I think he.
It's different, but yes, it may be better, but what he really wants you to think about is how the one becomes the other.
That's right.
How the rise is that kind of a rise as well.
That's right.
The opening stanza is so anti-romantic. Not just expressing the anger toward a friend, but this anti-Petrarchan movement. Well, that's in stanza 2, really. He said, let me love. My sighs haven't drowned any ships. He's overturning the whole Petrarchan tradition. But his love turns out to be more romantic in the end. The fire and ice of the Petrarchan tradition.
Yeah.
Quite fascinating.
The great problem with Petrarch is one that I find with many other great poets who have written very movingly of their feelings. The girl isn't there.
With Donne, the world isn't there.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. There's a wonderful book by Anne Carson called Eros the Bittersweet, which is a great pleasure. It has a very peculiar feature to it that I noticed, particularly because I had long taught a course that I call the Eros of poetry of Eros, and I divided that course in my simple-minded way into 3 parts: the I part, the love part, and the you part. I love you. That, Eros means a lot of things, but basically that's really the message. In Anne Carson's book, she has I, and she has love, and no you. It's amazing. It's amazing. She gets away with just, you know. And of course, that is a great truth, I think, that the important thing about love is to love, not to be loved. But that's not what she's saying. It's really curious. So Petrarch has many followers.
Well, the title of the poem, the next stanza, they'll be canonized for love.
Yes.
Furthers this idea of this new mysterious love.
That's right.
And also furthers his criticism of chronicles and of tombs and hearses, of the pitfalls or the follies of the wealthy and of the worldly, and that there's almost a martyr-like, we can die for it, we can die by it, if not live by love.
And I think that image of it's not simply the eagle and the dove. The eagle and the dove are transcended by the phoenix. And the legend of the phoenix is that death begets the new life, the resurrected life. And I think that's the tendency in Donne. I really do.
Are you saying in effect that they canonize one another? That
yes, yes, ma'am, yes.
Catholic tradition is to be on the way to sainthood.
Right.
So in that sense,
I do think that's right. Yep. Thou art the best of me. That's his basic stance. And he certainly is interested, increasingly interested in some. I think one of the things that is not expressed directly in his poems is the way his interest in the idea that he has a soul, an immortal soul, a component that if not holy is sacred anyway, and is tending towards something divine. Would you say that?
Yes,
is that exaggerated?
Yeah, no.
I think he is after that.
Yeah.
Right? Earlier.
Well, wasn't there just the standard religious idea that worldly pursuits was an evil, or was, that we should, I mean, he's picking up on, I think, a conventional religious idea to turn one's back upon gaining and acquiring wealth and
give it to the poor.
And give it to the poor. And
yes. He didn't have much choice. He was living in an uncomfortable house that someone lent them in a damp suburb of a damp country with long winters. Oh. And lots of children, by the way.
Yeah.
He had a friend who was his biographer, and I've always been very moved by that one of the stories that his biographer tells. That while he was away in the lowlands doing his dangerous mission, he dreamed that he saw his wife come into the room. Donne dreamed that he saw his wife come into the room carrying a dead child. Mm. And when, of course, he got home, he found out that one of his children had died. You know. That was Isaac Walton, who also wrote a famous book on fishing, who was his biographer.
On fishing?
Fishing, yes. Mm-hmm.
What lowlands are you talking about?
Sorry.
Are you talking about Holland or England?
Lowlands.
Lowlands, England, yeah. Holland. The Flemish.
Okay, would you, do you feel like reading a valediction? Forbidding?
I think so.
Forbidding morning, that would be great.
This is probably the poem which most successfully characterizes Donne as a metaphysical. People are always talking about the metaphysical poem, and what is really, I think, intended by that phrase in its original use of it was to say that the poem has lots of ideas in it. I think that the reason that Donne is so terrific to read, and the reason that he understands that women and men are equal, is that he's very smart.
Yes.
I think he's very intelligent. And more than that, along with that, he knows that one of the most exciting things in the world, really exciting, certainly as exciting as sex, is to have an idea. Boing! You know, when you really have an idea, when you really are possessed by intellectual excitement, it's very completely engaging, just the way all good human acts are. It's a matter for great joy. I have to find out, oh, I think I have a copy here somewhere. Where are my copies? There they are.
You want to borrow this?
I've got it, I think. I hope. Oh, I can't find it.
It's these 2 pages, starting here.
Yeah, it sure is. This is the valediction forbidding mourning. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes now, and some say, no. So let us melt and make no noise. No tear floods, no sigh tempests move. 'Twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears. Men reckon what it did and meant, but trepidation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. Dull sublunary lovers love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence because it doth remove those things which elemented it. But we, by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is, interassured of the mind, care less eyes, lips, and hands to miss. Our souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion, like gold to airy thinness beat. If they be two, they are two so as stiff twin compasses are two. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth, if the other do. And though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. Such wilt thou be to me, who must, like the other foot, obliquely run. Thy firmness makes my circle just, and makes me end where I begun. It's a doozy. It's really a doozy. Whenever you want to say, oh, well, metaphysical, they have all these ideas in the poem. Yes, they do. And this is what happened. This is the piling up of evidence. If someone is about to leave for the 10th time in 2 years, this is not a bad way to go. Leave behind some hope of improvement. There are good feminists who object that, well, you know, she's just stuck there. Yeah, yeah. You know, but what they're really saying is she's just home minding the 11 children. Well, yeah. If you want to take them into war, that's fine, but most of us wouldn't want to. Because where she sits is the center. And her firmness is what makes the circle just. I guess what they've got is a working partnership.
And he assumes that her quality of intellect, he assumes she can understand all these references to geometry and Platonism and what have you.
Yes, well, he was her tutor. He better.
He's an Abelard a little bit.
Yes, yeah, really. That, well, except it's a happier story, I think. No, it was short, yeah.
A remarkable fifth stanza that we've discussed. But we, by a love so much refined, that ourselves know not what it is. I mean, there is that mystery again, and then this new trust, interassured of the mind.
That's the phrase.
That's the phrase.
That's the killer.
Yeah. Interassured of the mind. Careless eyes, lips, and hands to miss. So that this love stays with them through, or he's making the case that through separation and through the anxiety, horrible anxiety of separation.
Yes.
That they can retain this.
Oh, I think so.
This trust and this quality of trust.
Absolutely. And there's that quality of the mystery of it all. Again, that's the mysteriousness. We ourselves know not what it is.
That's right.
But then that phrase, interassured of the mind.
He made that word up, didn't he?
Yes. Yes, he did. He compounded it.
Yeah.
Interassured of the mind.
I think the imagery of the compass is also adds to this notion of mysteriousness, because it's a new measure, right? And what you're measuring traditionally are mathematical forms, and yet all that does is open up the mystery of the universe, really. And so I think it connects to the mystery of love that he's talking about.
Right. That's interesting. That's a further justification of that compass image that I've never heard. That's very interesting.
It's part of the metaphysicality of it, isn't it? Using the metaphors like that.
Yeah.
And again, a little sexual imagery or suggestiveness in the final stanzas of the compass. Stiff twin compasses.
Well,
and grows erect as that
right.
comes home. He's always aware of sexuality and in his dealings, in his feelings.
Right. The move in those two lines he's talking about something metaphorical that stands for something physical, but the image that you get in your mind when you think and leans and hearkens after it is one of yearning. You feel that as the kind of attention you give to someone who's going into danger and whom you want to have come home soon and safe. Leans and hearkens after it. I remember World War II, when everybody, all the women I knew, that was, my generation. Those were the boys who taught me to dance, had their heads glued to the radio, trying to find out, what was going on, where is he, what's happening? Yeah.
This is something to come home.
Yes.
He says twice he must go. So there isn't a sense that the man gets to go out. He must go.
He must go, right, must.
Twice.
Very important, yeah.
These conceits are all, the conceits that we're talking about all have such alignment and symmetry. I wonder how they kind of, they kind of relate to the question of human physiology and of our more modern conceptions, the eroticism. Here we are modern men living in the 20th century. And in this course, in the 21st century, and in this course we've dealt with Thomas Hardy's love poems previously. We've dealt with other forms, other sensibilities. But here we have a type of love that aspires towards a kind of perfectibility, and in a way excludes, in some senses, the kind of conception of not, unromantic love, perhaps, or physiological love that we have in the 21st century, but that's mirrored in some of the other poems we read in the course.
There is one great difference between the situation in which the Donnes found themselves and ours. They had 11 children. We don't have to do that. So the transit from emotional and daily practical relationship that has its sexual moments is I think, markedly different for that very reason. We're in a position where we can divide it up and say, well, my favorite form of exercise is, other people go jogging,
There's less of this kind of all two as one. There's more individuation is the term that's more used.
Well,
and self-realization.
I would say we could use more of this. And in fact, he wrote these 500 years ago, so we're still in need of them.
And yet the magic is that people relate to them so beautifully.
That's right. Well, that's right.
So I find and Eliot, so we were talking about that. They both are separate in sensibility from the modern world.
Well, I think it comes that tone that Marie was talking about, the intimacy of tone, the openness to the experience, and the quality, the character of the experience. He just remains unique in his ability to depict it.
The interassured of the mind is followed in with just one more expression of the same kind. If I can find it, I can never find it.
In which poem is it?
In the Ecstasy.
Oh, yeah.
Inter-inanimate is his other invention. Inter-inanimate. Classy?
Yes, don't speak.
All several souls contain mixture of things, they know not what. Love these mixed souls doth mix again, and makes both one, each this and that. A single violet transplant, all of which before was poor and scant, redoubles still and multiplies. When love with one another so inter-inanimates two souls, that abler soul which thence doth flow, defects of loneliness controls. We then who are that new soul know of what we are composed and made, for the anatomies of which we grow are souls whom no change can invade. He makes the body, the soul, and then he makes the soul the body. And I think that's pretty good.
He moves inside. I mean, many of his observations are internal. And he sees how relationships change people's insides. He sees that very, very well. And
that's so true, yes. Exactly right.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone's wandering all over the map, and he's exploring his relationship and his insides.
That's right.
Yeah, this is it's also, I mean, it's a very radical idea to, live by your own lights and to, always, at all times, right.
So he's this incredible combination of great romantic and metaphysical.
Yes, I think so.
Which doesn't really seem to go together, but it does.
Well, I think it seems not to us, because our idea of romantic has been heavily influenced by romanticism,
right.
and then by the commercial consumer culture that we live in, so that it's we don't think that that's so hot. You know, we say that's for the women's magazines. You know, it would be very hard, I think, to find in an ordinary group of New Yorkers, pretty much any age, the idea that the most spiritual thing you could do, the most elevating thing you could do, the most absorbing and interesting thing you could do, was to have a great love affair with your wife.
Yeah.
What? You know.
And also to step back from the futile and absurd aggressions and aspirations and competitiveness of so much of social interaction. That's a very bold and radical idea too.
Exactly.
And a very political idea, really.
It's a very political idea.
There are Shakespeare sonnets that also talk about love in a very intense way. I mean, Donne wasn't alone.
But not married love.
Oh, I didn't mean to say that he was alone in writing love poems, but I would observe that the love poems that I'm familiar with are mostly about the speaker and the speaker's emotions.
Love isn't love, but alteration finds. So alters and alteration finds.
Yes.
Yeah, Shakespeare has both sides.
That's the Shakespeare sonnet.
That's the only one.
That proves your point. Well, no, there are more, but that's the one.
That's the one that's right.
That's the one. But of course, in Shakespeare, it's a wish. Let me not to the marriage of true love. Please, dear God, let me not admit impediment.
What about Song of Songs?
Yes, well, that's a pretty mixed bag. I mean, it's a strange work. It's one of the world's most glorious poems about love with enormous erotic content. Exactly what the hell is going on here? I'm not sure. But if you take it, if you excerpt the lines that do that, they are incomparable.
Well, if romantic love depends on obstacles, which has been a very old theory, Donne had plenty of obstacles to overcome.
That's right.
His marriage with his wife, and all these children, all of the daily grind, etc., etc.
That's right.
Interesting. So that marriage becomes something exotic.
True. Yeah, true. I'm afraid that we're running over. Are we
Yeah, well, do you want me to read the last one, or would you like to read the last one?
Yeah, why don't you?
Oh, really? Okay. Well,
Well, it's up to you.
I'd love to. I'd love to. It's so fabulous.
Yeah, it is.
Marie was mentioning when we met
I've got
earlier.
your book too. I'm terrible here. I'm here and wrist closed on the lap.
And don't forget, we're going to read two. We're going to read two of her. So we are.
I'll read something short.
Okay. No, we're not. Well, don't do that. So let me read this quickly, and you're going to read two poems, and they needn't be short. And as long as the evenings traditionally run an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes, so we're okay. I think.
All right. Good.
Now, speaking of music, yes, well, I mentioned before, Hymn to God the Father was definitely, he heard it sung. It was sung at various churches, and Maria was pointing out before, a lot of his poetry is put to music, but this has a particular.
This had a longer life, I think, than any of them.
Yeah. A hymn to God, and a hymn to God the Father. Wilt thou forgive that sin where I begun, which was my sin, though it were done before? Wilt thou forgive that sin through which I run, and do run still, though still I do deplore? When thou hast done, thou hast not done, for I have more. Wilt thou forgive that sin by which I won others to sin, and made my sin their door? Wilt thou forgive that sin where I did shun a year or two, which I did shun a year or two, but wallowed in a score? When thou hast done, thou hast not done, for I have more. I have a sin of fear that when I've spun my last thread, I shall perish on the shore. Swear by thyself that at my death thy sun shall shine as he shines now and heretofore. And having done that, thou hast done, I have no more.
One of the great puns of the world of poetry.
Right.
When thou hast done, thou hast not done. And I lived with that for many years, delectating in it. I love puns anyway, but I think anyone who loves language has a great affection for the way puns work and multiply the resonance of everything we say. But in this case, I came on something that knocked me out, took it to a couple of scholars I knew. One of them had heard somebody say something about it before. I don't know what John Donne intended when he wrote this. I don't know that he meant when thou hast...
For I have more?
Right.
Yeah. But go ahead.
Yeah. Because his wife's maiden name was
Anne
Moore.
Yeah. For I have more.
Well, a lot of people don't think that he meant that.
Yeah.
I do.
I do too.
Well, Howard Bloom is of two minds about it, so. Harold Bloom.
The tones here are so remarkable. It's like he can't reconcile. This is life. He wants forgiveness. He believes in God, and yet he knows.
Here I am.
Here I am. I can't give it up. It's futile. It's a contradiction. My whole life can't
Once
resolve
a fuck
it.
up, always a fuck up. Yeah.
That's right. And the humor. And the sorrow.
Yeah, it's all there. And it's all there because it takes in everything, the social relations. Wilt thou forgive that sin by which I've won others to sin,
right.
and made my sin their door?
He's not boasting here, but he's not repentant either. You know.
Well, he wishes he were repentant.
He wishes he were repentant. Fair enough.
As St. Augustine said.
Yeah, so he would like to feel bad about it, but he has one more, you see.
I have more.
Yes,
You
yeah.
know the last line? You read I have no more.
Yeah.
There are 3 versions of it, and I really, some views have. I think that maybe they have the strongest evidence, but I noticed Donahue is a big textual scholar, and I noticed that he prefers the fear, and it goes with the beginning of goes with the shift in the 3rd stanza. There's a big turn there.
I find that very powerful, that 3rd stanza.
Yes.
Where it's a little late, but turn your cell phones off and before the
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not
That he has a fear. I have the sin of fear.
How are there 3 versions? Wasn't he an English guy? I mean, how can there be 3 versions of an English name?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
She wants to know how there could be 3 versions of that line.
Well, after the first printing in 1631, there was another one almost right away, and it was changed in that version. And I don't know where the 3rd one came from, but I know one of those is have and the other is fear.
Maybe the way he read them. Maybe
Yeah,
changed
true.
the way he read them.
Absolutely.
What's the 3rd version?
I'm trying to remember it.
That's right. This was not
I forget.
printed. This might not have been printed in his lifetime.
Oh no, it wasn't.
So that manuscripts were handed around.
And I think it's because it was. I think it was because it was music, and it turned up in sung versions. Yes.
But in the last stanza, doesn't he really show his belief in God and his trust that, in effect, despite his sinning as a human being,
right,
that at the end, God will forgive him, isn't it?
That's right.
Right.
I think that's what he wants. I fear no more. And the more, I think, refers to Anne because he did make off with her. He didn't counsel her as a tutor, saying, "This is not a wise move on your part, my dear." He collaborated, you know. And I think that he felt great guilt for that, especially after her death. She died in childbirth.
But it was number 12.
No.
That was a lot of kids. A lot of women didn't make it to that many.
You bet.
Kind of like Rachel. Rachel died in childbirth in the 12th child.
Right. 12, yeah, that's right.
Who did?
Jacob's wife Rachel.
Oh.
That's right.
Giving birth to her 2nd child, but the 12th child of Jacob.
He's willing to give up sinning if he gets this reassurance from God, this very beautiful, selfless idea that even though he dies, the sun shall shine as he shines now and
There's
heretofore.
another pun, though.
Yes, it is. You bet.
The sun.
I like fear especially because it's the riddle of faith.
Yes.
It's the riddle of faith and fear.
Yes.
I mean, if you get rid of your fear, you have faith. But if you have faith, you have no fear. That has that.
Right. But he's asking God to do to make a promise that he won't fall into despair at the end.
But he can only do that by having faith.
That's right.
By believing that God will do that.
That's right.
That's really tough riddle.
Well,
It's almost that
go ahead.
having doubt is the worst fear. That losing your faith and being in doubt.
I think that's, yeah.
The deepest fear.
Well, you can see from,
Or the deepest sin, I guess.
yes, yes. Despair is the unforgivable sin, they used to say.
Yes, please.
Should we be surprised that as the father of 11 children, many of whom died, that they don't appear, as far as I know, in his poetry? He talks a great deal about.
I've thought about that too. And I must tell you, although I know this sounds really weird, I have 7 children. I don't write about them either. I adore them. They're my life. But
well,
it's a different place. I don't know.
Yeah. Actually, one thought pops into my mind. I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I remember reading that he did have a cold relationship, I think, with his oldest son. I mean, I don't know.
Yes.
It just popped in that I think his oldest son tried to involve himself in the in arranging a manuscript or helping with affairs, his financial affairs or something. And I think it was that Donne, some of his friends commented that he was unreceptive to his son, or didn't think his son was too bright or something like that.
Right.
That's at all helpful.
And also, he really doesn't write domestic poetry.
That's right. Nor
No,
was there
didn't.
much domestic.
No,
were
he
there
didn't
many
write
other?
about lunch.
Yeah.
Love literature has almost nothing to do with children. One major exception is Schlegel's Lucinda, in which a child is mentioned. But what else talks about children?
Well, Anne Bradstreet was writing poetry.
Oh,
at
yes.
the same time.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yes.
you're getting a different gender.
Almost the same time.
But what she wrote about.
And of course, you have 2 poems about death and Johnson.
Yes, 2 glorious poems.
His son and daughter, the death of his son and daughter very young.
It would be nice to hear one of your, some of your poems.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now we're in no rush, so we're going to have 2, okay? And and then she'll be happy to sign, and the books are for sale. Her selected poems is for sale. That's it.
I did bring it, didn't I?
Is that my briefcase? I think.
Yes, I did. Here it is.
What are you looking for?
Well, that's.
You want to read from that? Is that okay?
This is yours.
I know,
I'm
this is my
sorry.
briefcase. I think yours is in the other. Oh, you.
The reason I couldn't find my poems was that I was looking in his briefcase.
And I couldn't find my lipstick because I was looking.
This is tough. Let me tell you. Woo.
No.
My. This is a poem I wrote about dying, because I think it's only fair that I should say whatever I can so that my children will, when I'm dead, they will say, well, you know, she didn't think it was so bad after all. It's called Dancing Day, which is a title taken from a Christmas carol that I read in the Oxford Book of Christmas Carols when I was 12. And it's a carol called Dancing Day, which is about what they call the general dance, and goes from the nativity of Christ, because it is a Christmas carol, to the crucifixion. So I thought that was a very interesting kind of, it hypnotized me when I was 12. And I held on to it and used it for this. It's because one of the events that I began to experience when I was about 80, I began to remember myself in the past. Things I'd forgotten, entirely forgotten, would come to me and I think, oh yeah, well, God, that was did I really do that? Yes. Once one made many. Now, many make one. The rest is requiem. We're running out of time, so we're hurrying home to practice together for the general dance. We're past get ready, almost at get set. Here we come many to dance as one. Plenty more lost selves keep arriving. Some we weren't waiting for. We stretch and lace up practice shoes. We mind our manners, not staring, just snatching a look, strict and summative, at each other's feet and gait and port. Everyone we ever were shows up. With world-flung poor triumphs flat in the backpacks we set down to greet each other. Glad, tired, gaudy, we are more than we thought, and as ready as we'll ever be. We've all learned the moves separately, from the absolute dancer, the foregone deep breather, the original choreographer. Imitation's limitation, but who cares? We'll be at our best on dancing day. On dancing day, we'll belt out tunes we'll step to together till it's time for us to say, there's nothing more to say. Nothing to pay? No way. Pay no mind, pay no heed. Pay as we go. Exeunt. Omnes. Exit. Oh, and save this last dance for me. On the darkening ground, looking up into the last hour of left light in the star-stuck east, its vanishing flective, bent breathlessly. Thank you. I'll read you a political poem. I only have, I think, 2 of those. This is one of them. It's about the puzzle of getting all our news 12th hand. We don't know, we haven't got a clue as to what's really happening out there. But we take in the best we can what we hear. Evening news on TV. Seen on CNN in Afghanistan, 2005. It's a screen full of chaos, but the cameraman's getting good framing shots from behind one woman's back. The audio's poor. The shouts are slices of noise. I don't know the languages. No hot hit heroes are there. No wicked people are there. Achilles is not there, or Joshua either. Rachel is not there, nor Sojourner Truth. Iwo Jima flag boys, not there. Twin Towers first defenders, not there. My children are, thank God, not there, any more than you and I are not there. I safe screen watch. A youth, young in his uniform, signals his guard squad. Twice. Okay, go. To the tanks and the cameramen. Okay, go. The tank takes the house wall. The house genuflects. The tank proceeds. The house kneels. The roof dives. The woman howls. Dust rises. they cut to the next shot. The young men and the woman breathe the dust of the house, which now is its prayer. A dust cloud rises at one with the prayer of all the kneeling houses, asking to be answered, answerable anywhere.
Thank you.
Further information about our programs and a complete archive of past Philippides events is available at philippides.org.